3.
Hi, I miss you. I'm going to read to you. Are you sitting crisscross with your hands in your lap? Now we are on chapter 8. This is my hardback home copy. And before I begin chapter 8, I'm going to read just a little snippet of chapter 7 so you remember where we were. So listen carefully and don't interrupt. Sylvia nodded. Then she whispered, "Hush, Diana Brisket's looking at us," and bent her head over the enormous rent in the satin petticoat which she was endeavoring to repair. Here is the picture we saw last of the girls sewing. They had already learned that Diana Brisket was someone to dread. Her sharp eyes were everywhere, ready to catch the slightest fault, which she would then shrilly report to her mother. And her bony fingers were clever to prod or twist or pinch as she passed on stairs or landing. She was cordially hated by the whole school. After they had sewed or mended for 2 hours, they were put to sorting bristles for broom making, while Mrs. Brisket read aloud a chapter of the Bible to them. Then there was supper, a choice of bluish skim milk or a cup of thin potato soup, and then they were sent to bed. Most of them so bone-weary that in spite of hunger and the thin coverings, they fell into bed and slept at once, the dreamless sleep of exhaustion. Chapter 8. Bonnie did not last long in the kitchen. The second time that the cook hit her with the frying pan, Bonnie picked up a sauceboat full of rancid gravy and dashed it in the cook's face. So I want you to look up the word rancid and see what that word means. If Eli were able to tell us right now, I bet he could tell us. There was a fierce struggle, but the cook, one Mrs. Moleskin, a large, stout woman with a savage temper, at last thrust Bonnie into the broom cupboard and reported her to Mrs. Brisket. Can you believe that Bonnie's in another closet? Mrs. Moleskin was used to having a dozen terrified small slaves running hither and thither at her beck and call, and announced that she would not have Bonnie working under her. Accordingly, after a punishment which consisted of losing all her meals for 2 days, Bonnie was put on to doing the outside work, which was considered a terrible degradation. I need y'all to look up the word degradation and see what that word means. In fact, she did not mind it half so much as being in the squalid kitchen. Outside work meant fetching in coal and kindling, lighting fires, sweeping the front and back steps, cleaning windows and doorknobs, digging the front garden, and looking after the poultry. And we know that poultry is a word from the French influence of the English language, don't we? Bonnie, who was as strong as a pony, bore her 2 days' starvation with stoical fortitude. Please look up the word stoical. Twice, Sylvia slipped her a piece of bread, but the second time she was caught by Alice, who snatched the bread and ate it herself, subsequently reporting the affair to Mrs. Brisket. Sylvia then had to forego her own supper, and after that Bonnie would not let her sacrifice herself. One dark, foggy afternoon, when Bonnie, shivering in her thin overall, was sweeping snow off the front path, she suddenly heard a familiar whisper from the other side of the front railings. "Miss Bonnie, Miss Bonnie."